This place has seen it all. Lace making, art, war, dictatorship, and resilience and rebirth. It's not a tourist magnet like Berlin or Munich, but that's what makes it such a hidden gem. Honestly, I think Plauen has a lot to teach us about how people survive, remember, and rebuild. Hi, I'm Justine, the nerdy half of the Breakaway Bravehearts, and today I'm in Plauen, a small city in eastern Germany that's not on many people's radar, but which has so much to offer. Plauen isn't overexposed like Berlin or Munich. It's off the beaten tourist track, but a small city like Plauen can teach us a lot about how memory helps us repair. Now, if you're from my generation, you might remember the infamous "don't mention the war" Basil Fawlty flapping around trying not to offend his German customers and managing to do exactly that. Well, at the time it was funny because it touched something real, that kind of awkwardness you felt about raising World War II in a German space. But those days are long gone. In fact, the Germans have a word for the way that they have approached their discussions, their conversation of World War II. I'm going to attempt to pronounce it, Erinnerungskultur. I hope I got close. Thank you, Sonia, for helping me. It means a remembrance culture. It's about facing history directly, acknowledging the suffering and the victims, and acknowledging the complexity and the complicity that ordinary citizens were faced with. So today we're going straight into it. As we walk through Plauen, we're going to talk about what happened here during the 20th century, all that uncomfortable stuff, and see how the city chooses to remember that pain. We're starting in Theaterplatz, right outside the town hall. It might look like an ordinary space now, but back in 1989, this was the scene of something big. But first, let's set the scene. In 1945, Plauen was nearly obliterated by Allied bombing. About 75% of its buildings were destroyed, and thousands lost their lives. After a brief American occupation, the city was handed over to the Soviet Union and became part of the German Democratic Republic, or GDR. Daily life became about shortages, surveillance, and the tight control and restrictions of a socialist state. For decades, Plauen, like the rest of East Germany, lived under the shadow of the Berlin Wall, with travel and free speech tightly restricted. The city's people endured economic stagnation, environmental decline, and a lack of political freedom. And under the surface, frustration was bubbling up. And in 1989, it all erupted. On the 7th of October that year, East Germany's 40th birthday, no less, 15,000 people gathered here to demonstrate for their freedom and democracy. It was the first of the big demonstrations before the big ones in Leipzig, and it sparked off a chain reaction that led all the way to the breaking of the Berlin Wall. All the key moments happened right here. The initial assembly, confrontations with police and water cannons, and the crucial mediation that ensured a peaceful outcome. And now there's a monument to this precious moment in a space called Thomas Kuttler Platz, named after the man credited with keeping the peace in what was a very tense situation. Thomas was a quiet, tall Protestant pastor who made his way through the crowd, not waving placards or yelling slogans, but just calming people down and keeping them quiet. When tensions rose and the crowd demanded to speak to the mayor, Kuttler stepped forward and took on that role, making sure that the people's voice was heard. He had this incredible ability to connect with both the protesters and city officials, something that was incredibly difficult to do in a time of high mistrust. And he managed to forge the way towards peaceful negotiations. After the demonstration, Kuttler continued to serve as a bridge, leading talks that would shape the city's transition to democracy. For many in Plauen, he remains the quiet hero of 1989. Internationally, Berlin is synonymous with the fall of the wall. So while Berlin got the TV cameras and the dramatic headlines, Plauen's role was somewhat overlooked. But it was this small city that lit the spark, and that's worth remembering. After 1990, Plauen, like many cities in the eastern states, still faced economic challenges and population decline. Yet the city also experienced renewal. Once borders opened, Plauen citizens reconnected with the wider world. Today the city has rebuilt much of its historic centre, and its role in the peaceful revolution is increasingly recognised, even if it remains less famous than Berlin. The bonus is, of course, you're not fighting against crowds of other travellers, so you can relax and take it all in at your own pace. Awesome!
My name is Ismail.
Ismail?
My name is Ismail.
If you're enjoying this video as much as Ismail, you might want to think about subscribing and hit the notifications bell. Every subscriber helps us create more content and share what we learn with the rest of the world. And please leave a comment. I read all the comments. I just love hearing from our Braveheart community. But to truly appreciate the spirit of this city, we need to go further back into the heart of Plauen's medieval old town. Before the upheavals of the 20th century, Plauen's Altstadt was the vibrant heart of a prosperous medieval town. The old town hall, which dates back to at least 1382, has a Renaissance gable and a unique art clock that have watched over centuries of gatherings and celebrations. Back in the day, this place was always buzzing. Markets, festivals, people catching up over a drink, classic small town Germany. But it wasn't just a pretty town. This place was booming in the 19th century, thanks to one small, delicate thing: lace. Plauen began producing handmade lace and embroidery as early as the 16th century. The craft became a cottage industry in the town. Families would embroider by the lamplight in the evenings, kids learning from their parents, passing on the trade. But it was not just a hub of economy, it was also about creativity and pride. Then in the late 1880s, the introduction of machine-made lace and mass production transformed Plauen into a booming industrial city, rapidly doubling its population, creating immense wealth, and making it Germany's leading centre for lace manufacturing. By 1912, the city had grown to over 128,000 residents, most of them in the lace industry. But of course, lace is delicate, and so was this prosperity. The wars and the Great Depression hit hard. Jobs were lost, factories closed down, and Plauen suddenly went from being a city on the rise to having the largest unemployment rate in Germany. After World War II, under communist rule, the industry was nationalised, and while some jobs returned, wages and working conditions were often poor, and the artistry of the craft was at risk of being lost. Still, the story of Plauen's lace workers is one of resilience. Their hands built the city's golden age, endured its darkest years, and today their legacy survives in small workshops and museums that keep the tradition alive. Lace was such a huge part of Plauen's history, they have an entire museum dedicated to it. Sadly, I'm only going to show you the outside. Traveller tip: the majority of museums in Plauen are closed on Mondays. Noted. Overlooking the town stands Oberes Schloss, a silent witness to the city's most turbulent chapters, where more stories of hardship and resistance unfolded behind its heavy stone. This isn't your fairy tale castle. This is quiet, tough, layered. Built in the 13th century, it was once a seat of power, and then a courtyard, and then in the Nazi era, a prison. Nazi victims were many and varied, including a humble British housewife who found herself a prisoner of war. People are often surprised to learn that the Channel Islands was British soil that was captured by Nazi Germany. It was occupied for 5 years. The people there had a quiet resistance, and some of them were punished for it, including Emma. Emma Constance Marshall was one of many Jersey Islanders who risked arrest by defying German orders, sheltering escaped prisoners, or engaging in acts of defiance like spreading banned news or refusing to cooperate. Between 1940 and 1945, more than 300 locals were taken from Jersey to concentration camps and prisons on the continent. Emma was arrested for resistance activities and likely imprisoned here or in a labour camp nearby. After the bombing of Berlin, the Osram light bulb factory partially relocated their forced labour camp production to Plauen to secure the company's supply of slave labourers. Hundreds of women from across Europe were made to work in brutal conditions. After the war, the prison kept going, this time under Soviet control, to hold those deemed politically unreliable. Most of it was then torn down in 2013, but some of the original walls remain. Emma's story is one of many women, German and foreign, whose courage and suffering are part of Plauen's legacy. This city, like many others, has embedded memory, literally in its streets. It's always there to see, if you know where to look. Sometimes you're going to need to look down for those memories, and you need to watch where you step, because you might be walking over Stolpersteine. Scattered across the sidewalks are stumbling stones, small brass-plated cubes that honour the people who suffered under Nazi persecution. They don't mark palaces or prisons, but the doorstep of a home, a workplace, a life interrupted. A lot of the original brass has now faded, so they're not always easy to find. I'm here with the Hertzfeld family. Each is inscribed with the name and life details of a victim, name, year of birth, date and place of deportation, and fate, like the name of a concentration camp, and, if known, the date of death. The stones are researched and funded privately, and then are placed in front of the victim's last freely chosen residence or workplace. And among these reminders of lives interrupted, Plauen also celebrates stories of creativity and resilience. Just a short walk from here, you'll find the playful Vater und Sohn, a tribute to the city's beloved cartoonist, whose gentle humour offered comfort and connection, even in the darkest of times. Erich Ohser moved here when he was 6 years old, and this city had such an impact on his life and his career that he borrowed its name for his own. His pen name, o.e.plauen. Erich came of age here and was apprenticed as a locksmith, but then, against his parents' wishes, he moved to Leipzig to do a degree in illustration. His colleagues noticed he had a keen eye for emotion. They say he used to sit in cafes just studying people and then capture small moments and turn them into universal stories on the page. His passion was rewarded with quick success, but his politics were punished with danger. By the late 1920s, he was illustrating in publications that criticized the rising Nazi Party. His political cartoons attracted a lot of attention, particularly his jabs at Hitler and Goebbels. And in 1933, when Hitler came to power, Ohser was blacklisted, effectively banned from all press work. But then came Berliner Illustrator Zeitung. It was looking for a family-orientated comic strip. Ohser submitted his round-headed father and his clever son. And it worked. Even the Goebbels ministry liked it. He was allowed to publish again, but only under a pseudonym and nothing political. And so o.e.plauen was born. From 34 to 37, he produced over 150 strips for the paper, and they were a hit. His wordless cartoons just sent a universal message, and Ohser made his name across Germany. But in 1940, that name started to come under pressure. Das Reich wanted him to publish, and this time he needed to do it in the name of the regime. Ohser must have felt himself in an impossible position. He had to produce artwork that sent the regime's messages. He confided to his friends how much he struggled with the moral issue, saying that it was a betrayal of his ideals, and his loyalty to his values couldn't be silenced forever. By 1943, he was working in Berlin and the bombs were falling. Huddled with friends in a bomb shelter, he criticized the Nazi Party, speaking harshly of Hitler and Goebbels. A neighbor, eavesdropping, reported them. Him and his friends were arrested for undermining military morale. He was scheduled to trial on April 6, 1944, but Ohser never made it. The night before, he hung himself in his cell in order to avoid a show trial. He was only 41 years old and he left behind a wife and a young son and a wealth of cultural treasures. After the war, his stories were republished widely, and Plauen in 1993 opened the o.e.plauen gallery, and then later on, the Erich Ohser house, also closed on Mondays. Ohser's story isn't just about comic art, it's a story of a man in constant tension between humour and oppression, creativity and coercion. He wasn't a dramatic dissident, nor was he a Nazi collaborator, just a principled artist caught up in a brutal regime. His legacy reminds us that art can speak when words are taken away. But memory in Plauen isn't only shaped by what is created, it's also shaped by what is named. Places like Bahnhofstrasse reflect how the city has negotiated history through the words it chooses to keep and those it chooses to replace. This street used to be called Kaiserstrasse or Emperor Street. Then in 1933, the name was changed to Adolf Hitler Strasse. After the war, it was renamed, this time with a more practical name, more likely to last. It was renamed Bahnhofstrasse, meaning train station street. So in the spirit of Erinnerungskultur, after 1945, while spaces like Bahnhofstrasse were stripped of their Nazi-era names and symbols, new memorials were erected to honour those who suffered under dictatorship and war. Plauen is no longer a space of authoritarian darkness, but one of memory, colour and learning. In the rebirth of the city, you can see how Germany has learned to honour its history by making it part of the public conversation. You can mention the war. I have really enjoyed my day in Plauen. There's so many different things to see. And it's kind of inspiring to be in a city that spent more than half a century having to regroup, find that resilience and rebuild themselves again and again. You can tell that they are a city who are respectful of their past, committed to memory, but focused on the future. Next I'm headed to Zwickau, an intriguing little German city not too far from here, about an hour by train. I hope you will join me there. Until then, happy travels everyone!